my name is May Sexton. I was born in Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania, April 3rd, 1909. I left Mount Pleasant when I was about 3 years old. First, the family went up to Vancouver. We stayed there for about a year, and that's where my mother passed away. And then we came to California. And my dad, there were three of us. My sister Molly, who was 2 years older than me, and my brother Ken, who was 2 years younger. So we were all put in an orphanage in San Francisco. And my dad went to work moving people. He was in the moving business. So we stayed in an orphanage until we were grown. Tried to go home with my dad a couple of times, but it never worked out, so we always returned to the orphanage. My sister graduated as a school teacher, and they put me through nursing, and I became a registered nurse at Children's Hospital in 1930. I worked for about 3 years, and then I met my husband, Roy, in 1933. I met him on an overnight hike. My sister and he were in plays together. She asked me if I was doing anything that weekend, and I wasn't, so I went with him. And he said that what attracted me to him was my little hat, my big lunch, and my smile. So anyway, he was a pest. Couldn't get rid of him. But we had fun. So he asked how to get in touch with me, and I said I was in the phone book. And when he finally called me to go out for a dinner date, I called my sister and said, "Guess who I'm going out with?" And she said, "Who?" And I said, "Roy Sexton." She said, "Oh my God, he's a brain. What are you going to talk to him about?" Well, we went to a restaurant and ordered a steak dinner. And of course, had to wait for the steak, so he says to me, what do you think of the world situation?" I go, "Oh?" I don't know what I said. Anyway, we had a nice evening, and it wasn't long before he took me home to meet his mother, because his mother said he never brought anybody home, and I think it was the first girl he ever brought home. So she was all ready to set the marriage. Well, we talked it over and decided it wasn't fair to Mother to get married before she passed on, because Roy was taking care of her. But she insisted, so we met in April and we got married in November. Well, it's been we had 50 wonderful years together. We were married 3 years before our son Dave appeared. And it was 6 years later that we had little Bonnie. Bonnie was sort of a mistake. Roy didn't want her, but boy, were we glad we got her. So now we have 2 wonderful children. And Rory's gone, and I have them to bless. Take good care of me.
So tell us about how he proposed to you.
Well, I was over at his mother's one night, and he said, "Oh, I have something for you." So he gave me a box, and in the box, in toilet paper, was wrapped my wedding ring. That's how he did things. Anyway, a pretty wedding ring, and it fit. We decided on the date. So we got married November 27th, 1933. Some wonderful years together.
And you got married during the Great Depression.
Yeah, the Depression was on, and he was having time off, and I was having time off. And we had to take care of his mother, and so she came and lived with us for a while. We got an apartment that included Mother, but Mother was deaf, and she had an awful time when we had company. She sat there for a while and then always excused herself. So she didn't feel comfortable among people. So she decided to get an apartment by herself, which we helped pay for. And I had her over every Sunday for dinner, which she was thankful for.
And what was she like?
She was a cute, little, short English woman with a little accent. She was deaf, so we had a little trouble communicating. But she was very easy to get along with and did very well by Roy and never interfered. So we all got along very well until she got sick. And she stayed with us for about a year while she was sick and then finally passed on. She did stay here long enough. She saw Dave. Dave, I think, was about 6 years old when she passed on.
So tell us about Roy. When was he born?
Roy?
When was he born?
1905.
And tell us about his father. What do we know about him?
Roy's dad worked for the phone company. And Roy was 16 years old when his dad passed on. And of course, in those days, there wasn't such a thing as a pension. So they had nothing to live on, so he didn't have any choice. He had to go to work. So he was 16 when he went to the phone company and asked for a job. I think his first job was a bellhop. The telephone company calling for phone calls. So he worked for them almost 50 years before he retired. And his first job, being just a young kid, they gave him quite a time because he was an innocent young kid. So he'd work for somebody, and they said, send him across San Francisco to look for a right-handed wrench. And he had to take the streetcar almost across town to go get the wrench. And when he got there, they said, oh, we only have left-handed wrench. But the poor guy didn't know the difference. So they sent him to another part of town, and they got a phone call saying Roy Sexton's coming. They gave him quite a time, but it didn't take long before he caught on, and he was doing the same things to the newcomers. So he had quite a time with the phone company. And he enjoyed it very, very much.
Now, he worked as an installer for a while.
But what?
As an installer, he installed telephones.
He started off by installing telephones. And then he became a salesman. He liked that very much. And so he worked down the peninsula and in San Francisco. And was in charge of the airport for a long time. While he was working at the airport, they had to drive out to the airport. So he's always got somebody that lived there near the airport that could work there with his secretary. Well, his secretary was on vacation and he had to get somebody. Bonnie was working part-time at the phone company during vacation. So I said, wouldn't it be something if they sent your daughter there? And he said, oh, my dead body. And then he comes home and he said, guess who's working with me? So Bonnie just had quite a time. When she answered the phone, she'd say, Roy Sexton's office. Bonnie Sexton speaking. They said, who? And Bonnie said, and she said, I'm his daughter. And they said, oh, you poor thing. So, she had quite a time, the phone calls she was getting, but she stood up to it and gave it right back to them.
Well, now, Roy was a practical joker, wasn't he?
And Roy was playing jokes on everybody. Everybody loved Roy. He had a terrific sense of humor.
What were some of the jokes that he did? He played some jokes on your sister, didn't he, on the train?
Oh, my poor sister came to visit us. She was the only relative we had, so all the holidays she came. And she'd come down from San Francisco on the train, and then we'd take her to the train when she went home. So one time when she went home, he put a lot of heavy metal things in her suitcase. And he carried it on and stuck it up top so that she didn't know how heavy it was. And when it came time for her to get off the train, she couldn't budge. She can't have somebody help her. She was so mad at him. So she made up a nice story for him. And of course, we believed it. So she said that when she was trying to get it up off the shelf, she couldn't move it, and she said this young officer got up and gave her a hand. And he said, "My goodness, this is heavy." He says, "You can't carry this." So he carried her all the way up to her apartment. This is a story Molly tells. And they sat down, and she made him some coffee, and they got talking, and he asked if he couldn't come back, and he kept on coming back and coming back. We thought, oh, this sounds terrific. So we asked her to bring him down with her sometime. And of course, every time we made a date, he was going out of town, so we never did get to see her make-believe officer. And then another time when we took Molly to the station, Bonnie started to cry, so Roy grabs Bonnie, runs after the train. When she's getting on, he says, "Don't leave us, don't leave me alone with her, she's crying." And everybody turned around and looked at poor Molly. She never knew what he was going to do. None of us did.
So
that's what made it fun.
Wasn't there a story about an alarm clock?
Oh, he put an alarm clock in her suitcase and set it. And then he put it above there, and so it goes off in the train. Oh, she has got some time. Embarrassed the poor thing. He knew how.
And then what happened when he picked your friend Helen Brennan up at the train station?
Well, my friend Helen was coming down to visit us. We used to call Helen Lady B because she always looked just so. She'd bring her dog down. So we were working out in the garden, and I said, "Oh, it's about time to pick Helen up." I said, "You better change your shorts." He was filthy working out in the garden. He says, "Why? Why change for her?" So I couldn't convince him to change, so he looked filthy when he went. Then he picks up an old, musty carpet in the garage. He goes to proceed to pick Helen up. The train stops, and she's standing there waiting to get off, so he rolls the carpet, there was a red one, and goes and helps her get off the train. And she acted like Lady B. She took his hand and came down the stairs. So poor Lady B used to put up with quite a bit from everybody did. He wouldn't be happy unless he was playing jokes on somebody.
And then he had a friend that was very tall that they nicknamed the Moose.
Yeah, he had a friend that lived in San Carlos, and they called him the Moose. And they used to give him the Moose quite a time. Well, he gave everybody quite a time.
Didn't he mail a live frog to the Moose one time?
A live what?
Frog.
I think he put that in his desk.
Yeah.
And when he opened up the desk, he jumped out. Scared the Moose.
And then another time, didn't he have a bunch of hay delivered to the Moose's house?
Always doing crazy things. Never knew what he was up to next.
Well, let's go back a little bit to the early 1940s during the war, World War II. Can you tell us what life was like then?
Well, it was tough. We had to watch our pennies. And I guess we lived in Garden Village then.
And that was where your first house was?
That was our first house. We didn't know whether we wanted to buy it. Did I mention that? By putting down $5?
No. Tell that story.
Well, we were out looking. We didn't know what we wanted to do. And we came to this new neighborhood that was just going up. And the builder happened to be there, and we were looking at the houses, and he asked, were we interested? We said, we really didn't know. We were just sort of looking. Well, the house was under construction, and I loved the floor plan. And he says, now this is the time to buy it, because then you can pick the color scheme and all of that. And I looked at Roy, and Roy looked at me, and he says, we don't have the money. And he says, what have you got in your pocket? He said, $5. He says, I'll take it. So that was the down payment on our first home. So it was about a year later that we moved to 17 Garden Village. And it was a cute little house. We loved it there, but we're in the fog belt. But Roy had a beautiful garden. We had some good neighbors. And that's where Dave was born. Well, Dave was already born when we moved there. He was 6 years old. Bonnie was born. So we lived there until we came down to Menlo Park.
And why did you come to Menlo Park?
Well, both the kids were getting colds, and of course, Garden Village wasn't an ideal climate. It was cold and windy and wasn't good for the kids. So Daddy said, instead of going into hospitals, let's get into the warm climate. He hated to get the kids and send them to a hospital. So that's how we found our little house on 300 Princeton Road. And it was a cute little two-story house. And Dave slept upstairs, and Bonnie had her room downstairs. And we really had a nice little home. We loved it. Roy just loved his garden, made it a show place, grew vegetables and fuchsias, and kept him out of mischief. We had fruit trees, and I canned for the first time, and I sure canned. So it kept me busy.
And do you remember what you paid for the house when you bought it in 1944?
Is that when we moved there, 1944?
Mm-hmm.
We paid, what was it, 7,000 something, yeah.
And you sold it in 1989?
For 1,000.
Well, $465,000 cash.
Yes.
And what happened after you sold it?
Oh, then sold it in April, and then October they had an earthquake. And the poor young kids that bought the house were going to remodel it. I sold it as is, so they had a tent at first for termites, and then they were going to remodel it when the earthquake struck. And the contractor went over it again, and they said they had a nice basement, and they said the earthquake did its damage down there. And he says, we'd have to start from scratch. So he says, I suggest you just tear the place up, which was too bad because those kids paid a good price for it. So they started from scratch, and 300 was rebuilt. But she built a nice home, a nice 2 stories. She tried to keep the outside the same. So I think since then they've had about 3 new owners. And I think the first thing I ever did was to move into Channing House. I've been very happy there. I have a studio. I didn't have a choice when I came in because there wasn't anything else. And I just turned 80, and you had to be into Channing House when you're 80. But it's a corner apartment, and Flagel helped me furnish it. So we did a good job in furnishing it. Bonnie and her family helped me decorate it, and I'm very happy there. Sometimes I feel like I don't have enough room, but start getting rid of things, and all of a sudden you have enough room. So I've been there 8 years, and don't know how many more years I have, but as of now I'm 88 years old, kind of long enough to live. So that's why the tape, just in case, who knows?
And tell us about Channing House. It's a lovely retirement home.
Yeah, Channing is a very nice retirement home. Everybody's very friendly. They have programs going on almost every night, which are good programs, and to get outsiders to come in. And we've had an organ player and a piano player and singers, and have had plays put on. So there's always something doing. They have movies every other week, and bingo and chess and all sorts of card games. So and there's always a book review. So there's no reason to getting bored. And there's line dancing. I started the line dancing. That's fun. Enjoyed line dancing. I go swimming twice a week, and that's very good for me. We have a doctor that comes in 3 times a week, so we don't have to go to the clinic if you don't want to. And they have an infirmary. The second floor is the nursing quarters, and their nurses are always ready to take your blood pressure. If you have any problems, they're there to take care of you. At night, if you're not well, all you do is call downstairs and somebody comes up to see you, and if they feel like they belong downstairs, they bring a wheelchair and you're off to second floor. So it's a nice feeling to know it's there if you need it. You don't have to go to the crowd looking for a hospital or anything. Take very good care of you. We get 3 meals a day, and everybody puts on weight. We do have exercise, so it's up to you what you want to do.
And what are you getting pretty soon there? You're getting something pretty soon at Channing House.
I'm getting something?
Everybody is getting something pretty soon.
Oh, they're going to build a swimming pool. They hadn't had a swimming pool. So everybody put something in and finally they've gotten enough money, and they're supposed to be building it pretty soon now. So it'd be nice to have our own swimming pool. As of now, I go twice a week over to an apartment, Oak Creek. They have a beautiful swimming pool, so that's nice, and it's have nice exercise. Enjoy that very much.
Okay, let's go back a few years and talk about your son David as a baby.
Well, Dave wasn't too well when he was born. He had what they call a pyloric spasm. He had trouble eating. Well, anything liquid wouldn't stay down. It went so far, and then he shot it back up right at you. And it was funny that when I was in nursing, that was one thing I gave a report on. So when he started acting up like that, I thought, oh my God. So I took him to the doctor, and the doctor didn't believe me because he thought, well, here's a nurse that's looking for trouble. So he suggested I bring the bottle next time and show him. So I fed Dave, and he very nicely threw up all over the doctor. So he believed me after that, so they did x-rays. Well, this poor little kid was so hungry, he galloped down the barium. They wanted to see just how far his food went. Well, it was very fortunate. His pyloric was opened up enough contraction for heavy food to go through. So he's on a rice formula. There was only one place in the city I could get it. Poor Roy had quite a time going down, and had to make this thick formula and give him a thick nipple. And he...
Sorry, folks, I had to kill a fly.
He just galloped it down. So he turned out, he was that little skinny thing I hated anyone to look at, and then he turned out to be a roly-poly with the diet he was on. So after that, he didn't have any problem with him. He grew up and ate okay.
And then tell us about your darling daughter Bonnie when she was a baby.
Well, Bonnie came 6 years later, 1930.
40.
43. And, well, she wasn't really planned. And Roy wasn't too happy. He says, you mean we got to start all over again? He says, it's good having David walking around taking care of himself. And there was nothing too much he could do about it. He took me on some long rides, but nothing did anything. So anyway, and we had sweet little Bonnie. I don't know what we would have done without her. Grandpa was crazy about her. Dad was crazy. So anyway, we were happy when he was a girl, happy when she arrived, and she was a pleasure to take care of because there was nothing wrong with Bonnie. She was just a happy baby. So she added to our lives, and we had a wonderful time. And we decorated her little room downstairs. Dave slept upstairs. And they all went to school in Menlo and graduated from Menlo Atherton. So we were a very happy family for a long time until everybody started to get married and leave home. And left Daddy and I alone. I think Daddy enjoyed it. But then I was the one that would have to take over there. I used to turn on the television for him and everything. Then after she left, Mother had to do it.
But that was before remote control.
Yeah, before remote control.
So somebody had to get to tend the television set because King Roy laid on the couch
Yeah,
and watched it all night.
he sure did.
Okay, so how old was Dave when he got married?
Dave was 19. I had to sign him for his marriage license. And we try to talk them out of it. Well, how do you talk kids out of getting married when they're supposed to be so much in love? And then they had Debbie, and she was cute, and they had a nice family. They lived in Fresno because that's where Dave got his first job. And then they transferred him to New Jersey. He didn't want to go because his family was getting quite old and he ought to be around here to take care of them. But somehow he was talked into going back there. And I'm afraid that's where their problems started. It's too bad they left the Bay Area because they seem to be very happy here, but I don't know what happened.
And then they had another child.
Yeah, they had the two girls, and then they had little John.
And the second girl was named
Susie.
Susie.
Debbie and Susie. It took her, Winky had a lot of miscarriages, so it took her a long time to get pregnant. So I think there's 5 years difference between each one of them. And so there were the 3 kids, and little John was so cute. He was the best of the 3, I think. They had least problems with him. He just grew up. So they lived back east for a long time, and I don't know what happened, but anyway, things weren't going so well. I think Dave wanted to go into business for himself, and it didn't work out, and they weren't having any money coming in. So he finally decided to come back and live in to Fresno and see what he could get here because he wanted to come back to the Bay Area. So he got himself a job, left Winky back there to sell the house. Well, Dave came out here and was living with Susie. He was as happy as a lark. He didn't care if he ever saw his wife again. She was just miserable. She wasn't well. She had been operated on. I think she had emphysema so bad. She finally gave